What if I told you medieval Europe, the Middle Ages, wasn't always as white as your history teacher painted? What if the knights, the cavalry, the chivalry, the heavy armour, often portrayed as pale lords on white steeds, sometimes belonged to dark-skinned warriors? Today we go beyond myths, beyond legends. We look at real people, saints and soldiers, Africans in armour, and a history many would rather forget. Meet Saint Maurice, a Roman-era soldier turned martyr, whose legend echoes deep into medieval Europe. According to early Christian accounts, Maurice commanded the Theban legion, Christian troops from Egypt, the Thebaid region. When ordered by Emperor Maximian to slaughter fellow Christians in Gaul, they refused. They were executed instead. Their crime? Faith. Their legacy? Immortal. By the 13th century, Maurice was being portrayed as a dark-skinned knight in full armour. For example, a statue in the Gothic Magdeburg Cathedral in Germany, c. 1240, shows him with distinctly African features. Churches across northern Italy, Germany, Switzerland, and beyond dedicated altars to him. He became a military saint, not a submissive servant, but a heroic figure. That's right, long before colonialism, long before the transatlantic slave trade, medieval Christendom, including the Holy Roman Empire, venerated a black knight as a symbol of honour. So why is this story so rarely told in modern textbooks? Okay, imagine walking into a 13th century cathedral and seeing a black knight in armour staring down at you as a saint. That was real. That was Europe's past. So legends too remember the Black Knight. In the 13th century Dutch Arthurian romance, the Lancelot compilation, there's a knight named Moriaen, described as black as pitch from head to toe in both skin and armour. At first, other knights recoil. They assume he must be a devil or a demon. But as soon as Moriaen takes a sword in hand, speed, strength, honour, loyalty, he proves exactly what a knight should be. His virtues convince even the most sceptical. The text emphasises, though he were black, what was he? The worst? So yes, even the mythical world of knights and round tables had black heroes, not as servants, not as servants' sons, but as full-fledged knights. If medieval Europe could envision black knights in its legends, why do so many modern tales, movies, games default to white? The medieval world was never isolated, but people moved between continents. Among those were the Moors, Muslims from North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula, many of whom had African ancestry or connections. In Iberia and Sicily during the period of Al-Andalus, these Moorish knights served as cavalry, guards, even elite commanders, right alongside or against Christian knights. But it's not just Europe. In Africa, powerful emirates and kingdoms maintained heavily armed cavalry. Take the Kanem-Bornu Empire, 850 to 1846 CE. Under the rule of Dunama II Dibalemi, the empire built a strong cavalry force, importing Mali armour, riding war horses, and forging a military tradition that rivaled any in Europe. So while Europe was drawing lines between us and them, African kingdoms were walking into the battlefield with chainmail and shields, armour, horse, sword, the full knightly package. The knights of legend weren't just European invention. If African empires and Moorish kingdoms had cavalry and knight-like soldiers, why is our mental image of a knight still almost a white guy on a white horse? The presence of Africans in medieval Europe wasn't limited to saints or legends. There is archaeological and documentary evidence. In England, for example, records like the Pipe Roll of 1259 mentions Africans, referred to as Ethiopians, Saracens, or Blackamoors. One such man, named Bartholomew, was recorded as African and on the run, possibly escaping servitude. Also, and this is wild, in the 1990s, archaeologists discovered medieval human skeletal remains in a friary near Ipswich, Suffolk, dated to 1190 to 1300. Isotopic analysis suggested these remains belonged to a person of African descent, likely from North Africa. That means Africans weren't just passing through. Some lived, worked, died, and maybe even fought in medieval England, long before colonialism, long before Black Britain. So the next time someone tells you there were no black people in medieval Europe, you can ask, what about the bones under the friary floor? So we've shown legends, saints, real people, African empires, but why don't we hear about this in our classrooms? Possible reasons. As time went on, especially with the rise of slavery and racial thinking, many depictions of black people in Europe became associated with servitude or exotic outsiders. The earlier memory of black knights as heroes was downplayed or reinterpreted. Historians note that after the 16th century, representation of black saints like Maurice declined. Nationalistic retellings of history often try to present a white Christian Europe, minimizing the multicultural and African contributions. Over centuries, myths turned into legends and legends into obscurity. Literary and archaeological evidence scattered or lost, and modern biases filled the gaps. So in other words, parts of history were quietly erased, not by swords, but by stories, by selective memory, by rewriting who belongs. These aren't just dusty stories, they matter for identity, for representation, for truth. The notion that knights equal white European male is challenged by centuries-old evidence. Understanding this history helps broaden how we see medieval Europe as a more diverse, connected world. It also shows the long-standing presence and influence of Africans in warfare, in culture, in faith, long before colonialism. If you want a world where history includes everyone, not just those people decided to highlight, share this video, comment which story surprised you most, and subscribe to Review TV for more history lost in the shadows. The skull from Ipswich between 1190 and 1300 suggests real African presence in medieval England that pushes back racial diversity in Europe way before recorded immigration. The legendary Black Knight Moriaen was described as darker than pitch, yet praised as one of the greatest knights in the court of King Arthur. This shows medieval European literature accepted blackness in heroic roles. The fact that medieval Christians venerated a black soldier saint as a military hero, Saint Maurice, placed his statues in major European cathedrals and sometimes crowned emperors in front of his altar. The African kingdoms like Kanem-Bornu, which had well-organized cavalry long before, meaning armored horse and lance and knight-style warfare, wasn't a purely European invention. So here are some caveats on what we don't know. Not all sources are ironclad. With medieval history, especially involving race or ethnicity, documentation is patchy. Some claims, especially older 20th century reconstructions, can be speculative. Depictions of Moors or Black Africans in medieval art sometimes reflect symbolic meaning, not strict ethnic realism, so we must be careful not to over-claim. The historical context, medieval ideas of race were different from modern race concepts. Moor, Ethiopian, Black Moor could mean different things, a wide range of people from Africa, North Africa, and the Middle East. Recognizing this forces us to rethink, what does medieval Europe really mean? What does knighthood really mean? And who counts when we say history? If you believe everyone deserves a place in history, share this video, drop a comment and subscribe. Also drop a comment about which story shocked you most. Subscribe for more hidden history, and let's make sure these nights aren't forgotten again. Thank you for joining me, Nadia, in this video. I'll see you in the next one. Oh, one more thing before I go. Make sure you check my community page and post page, because I post regularly on there and there's just no activity from you guys. But anyway, I'll see you in the next one.